our laws is mined. But it does not seem operational when last Wednesday the House descended into chaos with a large brawl breaking out between government and opposition legislators. The legislators were debating regulations for the government's planned proportional representation electoral system when the violence broke out. Footage posted online showed Sierra Leone People's Party and the opposition All People's Congress shoving one another and throwing of furniture. Members of parliament were seen swinging punches and throwing chairs, forcing police to enter the chamber to separate the warring factions and expelled some suspected honorable troublemakers. The Sierra Leone Electoral Commission advised that the country switches to a proportionate voting system ahead of local and parliamentary elections in 2023. The move requiring parliamentary approval is supported by the government, but fiercely opposed by the opposition politicians who have branded it unconstitutional. Tonight, we're looking at whether or not Sierra Leone's democracy is under siege with the display of undemocratic tendencies, from fights to hauling the maize and furniture, to the destruction of properties, to inviting the police to the chamber, to the eviction of lawmakers, and to the absence of dialogue. My name is Samuel Weisbangru, and this is AYV on Sunday. All right, good evening, and everyone. Welcome to AYV on Sunday. Here on channel 33, on TV, on DSTV channel 399, on radio FM 101.7. Today, we would be reviewing the structure of democracy in Sierra Leone and the tensions in parliament over the PR system. Here with me, I have a star-studded panel to help me unpack these two conversations. I have with me Melvin Tijan Mansare, Senior Parliamentary Correspondent. Melvin, good evening and welcome to AYV on Sunday.
It's a pleasure to be here. Good evening to you, followers and viewers.
Right, I have the Honorable Indolo Givao of the ruling Sierra Leone People's Party. Honorable, good evening and welcome to the show.
Good evening, Samuel. Good evening, viewers.
I have Honorable Sir Charles representing the Coalition for Change in Parliament. Honorable, good evening and welcome to the show.
Good evening. Always a pleasure to be here.
All right, we do apologize for Nyamakuru Sila, who is meant to be here tonight, but unfortunately at the 11th hour called and said she has an emergency to respond to, and she sends apologies for not making it tonight. But you, our viewers and listeners, including our followers, can always be part of our conversations here. Share your thoughts with us, ask your questions, just tailor them on the issues being discussed. You can do so on our AYV News Facebook page. Drop them there. We will find time to go through some of them in the conversation. First off, before we actually get the precursory remarks of the panelists, let's go back to the Well of Parliament and just take a look at what transpired last Wednesday in the Well when members went into feast. It appears Parliament was a boxing ring on Wednesday, but let's take a look and we'll be right back.
That was the scene in the Chamber of Parliament as members of Parliament wrestled over the laying of the two constitutional instruments. Things got heated while the Attorney General and Minister of Justice was about to table the instrument when Honorable Hassan Sise, acting leader of the opposition, said this.
A kind of disappointment in this case, because if it was agreed between both leaders, I think that must be the situation. But coming back to the document that is to be laid here, Mr. Speaker, it is a statutory instrument. And statutory instruments are supposed to enforce the law. That is what is in the Constitution. And the instrument that is to be laid, from what I have in my hands here, Mr. Speaker, is not strengthening the law that it is based on. And of course, it is citing different aspects of the Constitution, which would be for a later discussion. But for now, Mr. Speaker, I don't think it is in the best interest of this country for us to have this document laid in the House today. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, when we look at the document as it is laying emphasis on Section 33.
However, the leader of government business, Honorable Matthew Newma, quoted Section 33, Section 171, and Section 56 of the Constitution and encouraged members of the opposition to follow due procedures, even if they are aggrieved.
Mr. Speaker, honorable members, let me read the provision of Section 33, and I will take my time to read one after the other. Functions of the Electoral Commission. Section 33. Subject to the provisions of the Constitution, the Electoral Commission shall be responsible for the conduct and supervision of the registration of votes for voters for and of all public elections and referenda, and for that purpose shall have power to make regulations by statutory instruments for the registrations of voters. Mr. Speaker, honorable colleagues, I clarify my colleagues to Section 171 of the Public Elections Act. Because, you know, this is just a lane. There are procedures if you have to challenge the instruments. There are different procedures. It's not strange to us when it comes to.
After a very heated debate, the Speaker of Parliament, Dr. Abbas Bundu, insisted that the proceedings should continue. This, however, was not pleasing to the opposition bench as the call for a reschedule of the said item on the other paper.
They are seeking to amend the Constitution again. And since that is the case, as I say, it is my humble view that these papers are not properly before us and they must not be released.
Let us, Mr. Speaker, proceed. Mr. Speaker, you are bound to lead it for me. Speaker, let us depart on this.
The heat went on, and the House was forced to stand down for up to an hour as a result of heavy riots between members of Parliament.
Elections, local government, proportional representation act, election 2022.
Even after the resumption of sitting, the House was still on fire. MPs suggested for the Speaker to invoke SO 43 for the restoration of order in the House.
Mr. Speaker, SO 43, please.
Grant your leave to the police to restore order. Mr. Speaker, we need order in the House. Grant your leave to the police to restore order.
As the heat becomes hotter, the Clerk of Parliament, under the instruction of the Speaker, ordered the Sierra Leone Police Force to remove the opposition out of the well, which was forcefully done. However, the instruments were laid before the House, and Parliament continues with the amendment of the Local Government Act. Samuel Tony Sawyer, AYV News, Freetown.
All right, that was the scene. The well of Parliament became the well of wrestling on Wednesday. I'm going to start off with the two honorable members. So in the eyes of the public and in our belief as a nation, that house is a very honorable house. And the inhabitants of that house are honorable members. But gentlemen or honorable members, what do you make of that attitude of members of parliament that has been described as undemocratic? Start off with you, Honorable Indologifao.
Thank you, Samuel. The behavior of honorable members on that day, I would say, was dishonorable, and their actions embarrassed us, those of us that were not involved in that barbaric act. And as a legal practitioner, I will describe it to be very criminal, because I later learned that this idea for them to come and fight in Parliament was nurtured prior to the sitting.
What did them?
those who fought.
Okay.
The opposition MPs who, while sitting was going on, came in front of the aisle to take the maize. They had already nurtured that plan. They had the necessary intention to perpetuate violence and assault other members in parliament that day. And anything that you actually have a preconceived idea of, which eventually ends up in, let's say, assault, malicious damage, and otherwise, it matters not the capacity in which you are that you did it. I will consider it as criminal. And that day we saw, property belonging to the state being destroyed. We saw people being assaulted. One of our colleagues was wounded with a knife. His shot torn. So, for lack of words, I would say that action was dishonorable, criminal, and embarrassing to us.
I must make haste to state that we invited the main opposition All People's Congress Party. The Secretariat of the Interim Transitional Governing Committee promised sending a representative. But then since we had that conversation 3 or 4 days, none of our calls have been returned or messages returned. So we did what we could have done to get a representative from the opposition All People's Congress Party. Honorable Sir Charles, the same question I'll put to you. That behavior of honorable members was very dishonorable. In the words of Honorable Indolo Guevara. That was that was the attitude put up by criminals. If I'm to go with what Honorable Indolo Guevara is saying. Yeah. So the well is now harboring people who commit crimes, people who are supposed to be honorable members. What is that putting forward to us as a nation?
Thank you very much for having us here tonight to discuss this all-important issue. And I believe it has become topical. You sound public opinion now. This is the #1 issue in public discourse that members of parliament are now fighting. To start with, I must say that it was unfortunate, and I feel ashamed as a member of parliament of this current parliament that we had to witness such an ugly incident. It is really, really unfortunate. There is no way I personally can justify what happened. But all I will say, I will differ from what my colleague said that it was criminal. No, I will not go that extent, because this is parliament, yeah? And as members of the 5th parliament, whatever happens there, right, involves all of us. Mm-hmm. Together, we take responsibility of what happened. And the incident happened barely 4 or 5 days ago, less than a week now. I believe our investigation will be, initiated. And at the end of the day, we will know exactly those who perpetrated, the violence and what could be done. So it is premature at this stage.
Honorable members.
It is premature at this stage, Samuel,
quickly, yeah, for
us to say it's a criminal act, right? So I will not say it's a criminal act, but I will say it was unfortunate. It was the unexpected of members of parliament. And on behalf of parliament, I take responsibility as a member of parliament. I want to say sorry to the people of Sierra Leone that we failed to meet your expectation as a parliament on that day.
Honorable members, is this synonymous to the 5th parliament's violence? Because I'm sure this is the 3rd incident since the 5th parliament was inaugurated in 2018. We've seen similar incidents of violence in the world. Is this synonymous to you, the honorable members, now?
I would say yes. And the reason for that is because the ones always involved in perpetuating this violence will not allow democratic provisions in the constitutions to be exercised or to be implemented in a very where it ought to be implemented.
It takes two to tango.
Well, you will say when there is a fight, you wouldn't wait until somebody stabs you. You have to prevent yourself or protect yourself. Like on that day, if you really take a look at the video, there was a fight between the opposition members of parliament and the auxiliary body of the sergeant at arms. I will tell you, if you look at that video very carefully, you will see me standing trying to protect the deputy minister and attorney general. I was there trying to protect him because I had seen danger coming towards him. If I had not been there, if Momo Bokri had not been there, if that flower vase had hit the Minister of Justice on his forehead, he would have been dead by now. So, all members of parliament that I saw there on the part of the ruling government went there to either protect the Attorney General and Minister of Justice or to prevent themselves. But this is what I want to say to justify my statement that that action was criminal. I'm a lawyer, whatever I say, I want to support it by law. If you look at Section 95 of the 1991 Constitution, with the side note, contempt of parliament, it says if you are in contempt of parliament, I mean, that contempt in itself can fall within the genre of criminal contempt. And parliament, the fact that parliament has punished you for criminal contempt is not a bar to you being punished or for an action to be taken against you in the general court or under the general law for a criminal offense. And I will say again, the fact that they went there with a preconceived notion to go and assault other members of parliament, to destroy properties belonging to the state, I will say that conceived notion which they perpetuated on that day, I mean, makes their action criminal.
What happens to what does the Constitution provide in terms of immunity or absolute immunity for members of parliament?
Samuel, I always tell people that before you say you want to go to parliament, the very documents that you are going to be using, you have to make those documents your friends. Nowadays, I realize that people say, oh, we have immunity, we have immunity. They do not even understand the provision that gives them immunity, the text of the provision that gives them immunity. Our immunity is limited to debate. It's limited to debate. When we are debating, whatever we say in the world while debating, you cannot question it in court. But even with that, there's a limitation also to that. In the process of debating, if Mr. Speaker realizes that somebody has said something defamatory against any member of the public or against any member of parliament, Mr. Speaker can refer that member of parliament who said that defamatory remark, who made that defamatory remark, to the ethics committee. And if the ethics committee come with a report to say that, yes, that statement was indeed defamatory against a member of parliament or a member of public, that member who made the defamatory comment should apologize in front of at the bar of parliament within 7 days, failing which he will be suspended. There are punishment to
that. So that immunity does not cover this act?
The immunity we have does not cover you destroying state properties, does not cover you using murderly invectives in the well of parliament, does not cover you assaulting another member of parliament or trying to kill the deputy minister and attorney general.
Okay. Just before we get into the issues, into the issues themselves at this point, Honorable Sir Charles. So you've apologized on behalf of Parliament. You've taken responsibility for the actions of members of Parliament. But this is not happening for the first time. It's not happening for the second time. This is the third time that the well is becoming a wrestling zone for members of Parliament. So it appears the members of Parliament, I mean, the only difference now for many is that, they have the honorable title. But in the last 3 incidents of violence, they've also been seen as those who perpetuate violence outside. So members would say, oh, wait a minute, we're safe to say the parliament is the microcosm of the entire society of Sierra Leone.
Well, I will not want us to look at it that way. Yes, indeed, those violence eruptions in parliament that has happened in this 5th parliament, as I said, it's unfortunate, and that has been my stand. And we do not want to see such situations replicating themselves every now and then. And I am not here to just come and apologize and say that every now and then when Parliament misbehaves, we see people come to opposition. No, that's not the case. When you look at all of these incidents, right, the opposition has their own case, right? For instance, the Benchimani incident that has to do with the contentious census, right? We have our case. We are on recess, and all of a sudden, we saw a publication talking about the census. Haven't gone ahead and did all the code for the census before doing the legality, before coming with the paper. And even when they came with it, we found out that some procedures were not duly followed. So by then, as opposition, we objected to them, right? But as usual, they invited the police and forcefully the papers were laid. Okay, all what we are saying, these happenings are not unusual, especially for a parliament like ours that is a hung parliament, a parliament in which the ruling party does not have absolute majority. What we expect in situations like this is more of what? Negotiation, dialogue. Let's talk. We want to see a situation wherein the ruling government, the ruling bench, will sit with the opposition. Some of these things, we can talk them out. It's not a situation where you think, because you're in governance and you have all the state apparatus under your control, you know, you think you can just use them at will to have your way. You know, this is the point.
All right.
So when you look at the genesis of all of these incidents, you know, I will not say the opposition were 100% correct, but we have a case.
And you belong to the opposition.
We have a case. But with regards to the last incident, I must say it was purely between the main opposition, the APC, and the SLPP, and the sergeant at arm, along with the police, because they were the ones involved in it.
Were SLPP members of parliament involved in the fracas?
Well, the videos are all out for public consumption as we speak. And I believe it is early for us to judge.
I know investigations has been mounted already.
You saw SLPP MPs there in the video. You did not see C4C MPs there. You did not see NGC MPs there. You understand? Definitely, the fracas is between them. Okay? So it's not a question of saying it is one side. But at the end of the day, when the investigation is completed, all what we are saying is that we want the investigation to be thoroughly done, devoid of all partiality. At the end of the day, we see how together we can clean the image of Parliament. But for us to achieve this, going forward, the government should be thinking highly of dialogue.
We'll come to those specifics. Let me bring in Melvin Tijan Mansari. Melvin, just paint us a picture of what really led to that chaotic incident in Parliament last Wednesday. What were the issues?
Well, basically, the issues were, firstly, the PR is a contentious issue.
Right.
From the onset, the day it was first presented at committee room number 1, it was problematic. Even when it was tabled in the world, it took the opposition leader to call the Justice and Attorney General's office to order that there was a need for some regulations and amendments to the Constitution. So against that backdrop, it has always been divisive. And if you follow the debates organized by, I think, CRI, it can enhance that, in fullest. So what we saw was like a breakdown of consensus decision and a violation of procedures. Firstly, a breakdown in consensus building or decision taking, in the sense that we saw the leader of the acting leader of the opposition, Honorable Hassan Sise, saying that, oh, they were not preparing for that debate. They were expecting that item should come up the other day and they will need time. And that was seconded by another proponent, Honorable Bar from the same APC, saying that, oh, there are constitutional issues with regards to the nomenclature of the legislation itself, whether it should be statutory or constitutional instrument. I'll come to that perhaps if time permits. Yes. So against that procedural, against that constitutional argument came the issue of the first part that I explained, that procedurally, I think the main opposition got it wrong. I don't know if it was as a result of the absence of their leader, but they got it wrong in the sense that the standing orders and the Constitution is very clear and explicit on how you handle papers before the House. And yes, it is the right, and I will agree with Mr. Speaker that if you want to contend a legislation, order, a regulation, or whatever piece of law, firstly, you must allow it to be tabled. And after which, you can ask for a debate on that piece of legislation. And if you go to the Constitution and the standing order again, it's very clear as to how you go about some of those instruments, be they statutory, constitutional regulations or not. And I think in this case, the main opposition APC did not follow that line. And unfortunately, they turned into what I'll call a physical fisticuff, attempting to confiscate the mace, for me, constitutes an investigation by the Ethics Committee. There should be an Ethics Committee. Honorable Geva was seated here, as faced the Ethics Committee. I was there, I covered it. And the Ethics Committee is there to look at the privileges of members of parliament. And if you look at section 97 and all the coming sections, you will see that MPs have got privileges. We don't have time to outline all of them. So wherein those privileges are being abused, and in this case, it is the public opinion that they've been abused, because members of parliament should conduct themselves in a manner that is described to be honorable. They must not seek to alienate themselves. They must not see. So all of those things.
So who were those involved in the fights? Because from the SLPP's submission, that was a fight between the APC